Hello there, and welcome to this damn fool idealistic crusade. This is the second of my film audio commentaries where I'm going to try and tackle a film solo and try not to blabber on too much over a film I really adore. So, this is going to be a commentary on Batman Returns from 1992, directed by Tim Burton, and really a seminal film of the comic book film adaptation genre, and one that's really gained a following ever since its release, and I think is now seen much more in a positive light as an artistic success than it was on its original release, where while it was still a sizable hit, it did not hit the levels of Batman '89 and was considered a disappointment in a lot of areas, particularly for the studio. And the sort of backlash against the film's very adult nature and very dark storyline, of course, is very notorious for prompting McDonald's and other merchandising partners to raise concerns and pull merchandise because it was not really designed to be a big, happy merchandising film, which, of course, influenced Warner Brothers as the controlling studio to push the series in a new direction, and is really the primary factor why Tim Burton did not return for a Batman 3. So with that being said, I will also, like in the Batman '89 track, I'll talk a little bit about the various script drafts. Like Batman '89, the original writer was Sam Hamm, whose script for Batman 2 is basically completely different. But it has some of the same core ideas. You know, it's set around Christmas time. You have Penguin and Catwoman and stuff. So they did use some of his concepts, which is why he has one of the main story credits. But then Daniel Waters was brought in. Tim Burton, I guess, saw Heathers and really liked it. And so I think that's where all of the very subversive humor and very, very obvious sexual innuendos came in and things like that. And then finally, the last writer was Wesley Strick, who came in and basically kind of pulled everything together, because if you read the Daniel Waters script, there's a lot of monologuing and things like that. There's also nothing about the firstborn sons of Gotham and that part of the Penguin's plot, so that was something Wesley Strick added, which I think does add a nice dimension to the film. So I'll also talk about the novelization by Craig Shaw Gardner again, a little bit about the production and just whatever comes to mind. Of course, a lot of character analysis and things like that, and it's a challenge trying to do one of these by yourself. And as the great Sir Roger Moore put it in his commentary tracks, just enjoy this if you can, and imagine it's like a warm, intimate conversation with a friend. Unfortunately, just a one-sided conversation. And I'm just going to be going off the cuff and just whatever comes to mind. So at some points I'll just be trying to keep up with the events on screen, but then I might get sidetracked on various tangents about the film's production. So with that being said, I will be using the 2005 DVD as a good base to go off of, and you can sync whatever copy of the film you have, whether it's VHS, Laserdisc, DVD, Blu-ray, the UHD version, or something on a streaming service, and it can just be a rough sync. It doesn't have to be exactly perfect. These YouTube online commentaries are they're very much a work in progress for me. This is my only my second attempt at doing one. So go ahead and queue up your particular version of Batman Returns to the 0 minute 0 second mark, and in 3, 2, 1, press play now. All right, so we have the classic Warner shield and the return of the Elfman theme and a fade in to a beautiful snowy background. And immediately we are plunged into a sort of Neverland fairy tale style feel, which is still very stylized, very much of you can't really tell what age it is in terms of decade, but we are completely and firmly in Tim Burton world now, as evidenced by the Paul Rubens cameo here. There's a number of cameos here from various people who had been in Tim Burton films before this, and this is the origin of the Penguin, which is completely made up for this film, because the Penguin, of course, has been completely reborn as a full-on Tim Burton, deranged, freakish sort of character. I love how this is completely without dialogue, and as dark as this is, and as much as like a fairy tale this is, there is this sort of macabre, dark humor evidenced here at the lovely baby crib with the bars, and then the cat, poor cat, is going to be pulled in and eaten. And of course, there you have the little rubber ducky, which I'm sure is meant to tie into the penguin's giant mechanized rubber duck later on. And they share this wordless glance and then down the martini. So they've made up their minds to just, kill their baby at Christmas time because that's just what bad parents do. And as if you didn't know this was a Tim Burton film, we have the la-la-laing background chorus on the Elfman soundtrack, which really is definitely more nuanced and character-driven than the 89 score. This whole film is much more intimate. We have this whole scene here, and all the sets are very intricate. Most of them are refrigerated for the penguins and the actual snow that's falling. This is one of the most beautifully shot films ever, I think, because of the snow. And here we have the baby carriage that, has all the straps to keep the demon child, as they would have called it, strapped in. And they've just thrown him into the sewer, and they're going to move on with their lives. This is a very dark opening for a Batman film, of course, but beautifully shot and with this very strange, macabre, dark humor. And I love here where the cries of the baby fade off into the darkness. Tim Burton said he was inspired by the drop in Pirates of the Caribbean for this point, which makes perfect sense. And here we have the opening titles, which follow the penguin's journey around, but they're done in the same manner as the 1989 credits. So we have the build up to the Batman theme on the title card, just like 89. But you can tell the orchestration's already very different. Again, Danny Elfman didn't just do a cut and paste, which I really appreciate. In a lot of ways, this is... I can't really pick a score that I prefer, but this one has the more nuance and more character. And here on the title, we have the bats and the little clang noise. Now, this I will have to mention as a sound geek. This was the film that premiered Dolby Digital 5.1 surround sound and major North American markets and theaters. Unfortunately, they didn't really have many installed, so very few people saw it that way. Most people saw it with the Dolby Stereo SR track, which is the same thing on the VHS tape and Laserdisc releases if you're watching those. But you can tell in a lot of the effects, even on that track, there's a lot more discrete sound channel usage in the surrounds, and they had tested 5.1 before. There was an earlier system before Dolby came out with theirs called the CDS, or Cinema Digital Sound System. It was used on a handful of films like Terminator 2 and Days of Thunder and The Doors, and also Edward Scissorhands, ironically. So Tim Burton was already moving into more discrete sonic palettes by that point, because Edward Scissorhands is the film he did between the Batman films, and I think its influence is all over Batman Returns. But anyway, sonically, you'll notice in Batman Returns, it's a lot more technically alive of a soundtrack. There's a lot more discrete sound usage, and that's fitting that this was the first Dolby Digital 5.1 release in theaters. But again, most people didn't see it that way outside of like New York, LA, London. I think the first time it was that way on video was the DVD release from 1997, which is 5.1. And that carried over to the later DVDs and Blu-rays. But it's just a fun technical note that this is the first, official Dolby Digital 5.1 film. Here we have the Melniker and Uslan credits. Peter Guber and John Peters get credited, but they really were nowhere near this film. Tim Burton really didn't want to have anything to do with all the problems and pressures of the first film, and he had to be lured back to do Batman Returns, which is why it's a straight-up Tim Burton movie. There's a lot of things done to distance it from 89. They did not use the Gotham City and Inferno sets, which had been kept, which it's unfortunate that they did that, because, it would have been great to have another romp there, but the Bo Welch production design in Returns is very underrated, and I love it as well. And it fits that the whole film's more intimate. Here we have the very Tim Burton-y moment of the penguin's crib being found by a bunch of emperor penguins, which is a little bit bizarre, and you're meant to, draw the conclusion that he was eventually found and taken in by the circus, the Red Triangle Circus, which is alluded to later on. So here we are 33 years later in the new Gotham Plaza. Of course, there's no Monarch Theater here, but also you'll see these Volkswagens all the time. I think they had a product placement deal, so if you look very closely, you'll see practically almost all the cars in Gotham are Volkswagens of some type. So there's no taxi with the Sanchez Mexican food, and there's no Monarch Square, but you'll see the Christmas tree, you'll see Shrek's department store, and you'll see a bunch of Volkswagens in Gotham City. Here you can see the snow. I got to mention, it does bug me they used that stock sound effect there of the crowd, but I always hate it when that pops up in movies. Here we have the lighting of the Christmas tree and the wonderfully ditzy ice princess. And here we have the penguin's entrance. And I love the creepy shots of him down in the sewer just reflecting on his plan and how he's aspired to do this for so many years to exact his revenge. Here we're introduced to Alfred, who's doing a bit of holiday shopping. If you're wondering why Alfred is even in Gotham Square, originally there was a little bit more plot where once the attack starts, as Batman's getting onto the scene, Alfred winds up trying to save a little girl and then gets in over his head. And while the Batmobile is going around, Batman sees this and shoots some of the I forget what they're called, for lack of a better term, the bat balls that he uses to shoot off the motorcyclist that hits him in the chest. But he basically manages to save Alfred, and Alfred does this little tip of the hat, which is a very cute touch. I wish they kept it in. I don't know why they cut it. And that's also why Bruce is just sitting at home alone. He's brooding, but it's also because, Alfred went out shopping. I hate Christmas. Here we have the top of Shrek's with the cute Felix the Cat style mascot, which of course is most obviously meant to tie into the fact that that's where Selina Kyle works. Here's our introduction to Max Schreck, played by Christopher Walken, with the most amazing hair ever. And really, Shrek is the main villain of the film in a lot of ways. And a lot of people complain that, why is he in this movie? Why do you have all these characters? And Batman's like a supporting character in his own movie. But Returns furthers the idea of Batman as the mysterious enigma far more than the 89 film. And Keaton would always cut down his dialogue, too. This is really the main plot thrust of the film here. A lot of people don't really pay a lot of attention to because it comes quite early. This whole notion about Shrek and the power plant he's trying to build really is his motivation for the whole movie, why he wants the mayor recalled, because the mayor here is not falling in line. It's established here that Shrek has a great controlling interest in everything in the corrupt government, which is still an issue, even though Batman, helped a lot of that out in 89 by getting rid of the Grissom gang. Here, Selina tries to, say something important or interesting, so she looks like something more than a secretary and sticks her foot in her mouth in really a not very good work environment, of course, as is evidenced later on by her near-fatal accident. And this shows her just, very, very, very pitiable character, the way she starts out at, which sets up the really amazing character arc for Selina Kyle in this film. Here we have the very, 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 trying to think of the right word, thick skull seeming Chip Shrek, son of Max, who is, ironically, for a guy who doesn't seem to care about anything but power, is the one thing he seemingly does care about. The whole power plant notion is actually, really just a money-making scheme. It's going to be a giant capacitor. It's going to suck all the power of Gotham City and stockpile it, and then I guess basically, sell it to the highest bidder when there's no power left. So it's an interesting scheme. It's just kind of there, and then it's alluded to every once in a while, but it's still the motivation for everything that's going on. A lot of this is gone into in the novelization a bit more in terms of the character inner monologues and some fine details. If you haven't read the novelization, I do recommend it if you like the film or you wanted to know more. There's a couple of little extra tidbits that are interesting, there's a bit from one of the original script drafts about Selina having gone to a female self-defense class, which is how she knows how to fight as Catwoman, if you ever wondered why that happened. But it's a lot of little things, and you get a nice tone, and it was also written by Craig Starr Gardner, who was brought back after his Batman 89 novelization, so it kind of goes hand-in-hand with that. So every time I rewatch the film, I reread the book. To talk about the original story written by Sam Hamm, known as Batman 2 for a minute, like I said before, it has the Christmas theme, it has the Penguin and Catwoman were the two villains they had already settled on, but it's a completely different story. It's primarily about themes of class warfare, and the whole story is Penguin and Catwoman kind of ally themselves because the Penguin's going after the 5 families of Gotham who all have these mysterious raven statuettes that actually point the way to a secret fortune that their families stole many years ago during the early days of Gotham in the 1800s. So there's a real mystery story going on. Bruce as Batman has to be the Dark Knight detective. It's a lot darker of a film. It's got a lot of action. They worked Robin in again. Robin was in almost all the script drafts right up until the end. It's reported that they actually hired Marlon Wayans to play the film's version of Robin, and he actually gets residual checks still to this day, even though he was finally dropped from the film. And in the final story we get, there's really no room for him. But if you read the Sam Hamm Batman 2, it's probably the best working in of Robin in any of the original script drafts for Batman or Batman Returns. It's a very good story. Would have made a great movie, Sam Hamm's Batman 2, but Tim Burton really didn't like the direction. In fact, apparently he hated it, and eventually just went the complete opposite direction and brought in Daniel Waters, who was, known for completely different stuff. And I think Waters and Tim Burton kind of got together, and this is where the really dark humor that's both very morbid and very whimsical comes in. And again, if you've ever seen the movie Heathers, which has really put what put Daniel Waters on the map, it makes total sense where you get the Christopher Walken character and all of the dark, demented wackiness that's all throughout Batman Returns. But again, like 89, I think what brings back the story structure and the flashes of narrative drive, because this does not have the same strong narrative drive as 89 does, it was the final writing by Wesley Strick. So that's why there are 3 credited writers here. And here we have the Red Triangle Circus Gang, complete with Vincent Schiavelli as the guy with a Gatling gun and his monkey. It's bizarre, and you kind of just have to go with it. Here we have the police are being overwhelmed. This has been cut down a little bit from what's in the various scripts, so it looks like they should immediately call for Batman. And this is such a beautiful scene, Bruce brooding alone in the darkness, and the theme starts to wail up very slightly. Perks up when the bat signal comes through, and then is reflected as if anybody couldn't see that. But suddenly he's alerted, he's needed, and then here he stands up as if he's physically embracing his calling and his actual destiny. It's a visual metaphor in like 5 different ways, and I've always loved this moment, capped off by this lovely tilted shot from the Penguin's perspective in the sewer. Now, this line here about the guy who runs the show is, of course, alluding to the fact that the real power behind everything is Shrek, and this is why he will be the Penguin's ultimate goal. This is a funny bit where, even though Shrek cares about his son more than anything else, he still goes to save his own skin, which is kind of funny. Because later on, he actually, sacrifices himself to save his son, which is the one shred of humanity he has in the whole film, which is an interesting touch if you really look at it that way. Just like the Joker in 89, the Penguin's reveal is held for a long time until he's revealing himself to Shrek, and that's wonderful dialogue scene in the old Arctic Zone. Now, this here with the toy shop is part of a dropped a little bit. Originally, there was a shop stuffed with Batman merchandise. That was part of, original subplot about the city, being obsessed with Batman. And then when he's framed, they immediately get rid of all the merchandise. But, and the Penguin's goons will have been, already setting the Batman shop on fire. So Batman comes in, and the darkness of 89 is still here. Batman is still going around, just straight up killing people. But there's a certain distancing. You can get an idea that Batman's character in this film, he's kind of tired already of doing this. It seems like it's an endless thing, and that he's not really getting much of anywhere. And the city just now kind of expects him to always save the day. And, at a moment's notice, if, some demented criminal frames him for a crime, well, they're just going to believe that. Now, as uncomic accurate as this is, the moments where he straight up murders people are quite delicious here. We have the fire breather that here in this visual gag gets killed by the Batmobile's afterburners. And he, it's literally obviously a stuntman, but he literally just sets him on fire. And Batman is just like straight up, no bones about it. Now, this is the first confrontation of Selina and Batman. Beautiful shot trying to get to Batman coming out of the Batmobile. Always thought the sort of bat makeup there was interesting. Very Dark Knight Returns, just on the clown. And then the shots where Batman just takes out guys one-armed is really, really cool. And like 89, this film was, shot and is printed very, very dark. I was able to see a print of this, an original release print, about 2 years ago, and it's just beautiful to look at on the big screen. And like 89, it was kind of brightened up on the earlier video releases. So again, in the darker scenes, it is properly dark enough, but the UHD 4K master really does fix a lot of that, which is really beautiful to look at. The unfortunate part of the 4K version is that they changed some of the color timing a little bit. There's a lot of cold blues and all the backgrounds of the cold, set scenes in the film, which is, most of them. But they're very nuanced, and on the 4K master, they're kind of going over into the teal color territory. It's not awful, but it's unfortunate. But the even bigger problem is, like 89, it's been completely remixed into Dolby Atmos, and they replaced a lot of the original sound effects, which is something that drives me crazy. And I think it's unfortunate, as this is the first Dolby Digital 5.1 release, that the original, historically important mix is no longer present on the disc. So that's something I should have never done. Now here is Commissioner Gordon, again played by Pat Hingle, and this is practically his only major scene in the movie. He seems very, very, very ineffective. There's a little bit extra about Gordon and the police and the mayor in the novelization, but they're just really background characters for the story, which is really a three-hander between, four-hander between Penguin, Max Schreck, Catwoman, and Batman, who, admittedly does kind of take a back seat to everything in terms of action and screen time, but, that gives credence to the whole he's a day player in his own movie. But again, this is not a movie that's trying to be an 89 sequel. This, admittedly, it's kind of an arty movie, as you can tell by this shot here and the Elfman music. Again, this is a straight-up Tim Burton movie. We don't just have an establishing shot of the abandoned Arctic world, but we have a full swirly moment through the whole thing. Again, this movie is beautifully designed and shot. I mean, every little bit of it, right down to Max's makeup here. He kind of has a little purple in his face, because obviously they're all freezing down here, but, they're all a little worse for wear. This is the Penguins reveal. I love how he staged behind the Emperor Penguins, and he just says hi. The character of Schreck versus the Penguin it does have a bit of that class consciousness that was the main theme of Sam Hamm's Batman 2, and I think that's one of the core ideas that stuck all the way through the writing process and development of the film. So I do get why he got the story credit, but if you read Batman 2, outside of the theme and the setting and Penguin and Catwoman, there's really not much to do with the finished film, because the Penguin characterization is totally different. Tim Burton had a big hand in just completely making this character from scratch and turning him into this extremely pitiable, sort of mutated castaway of human society. Now, here with the umbrellas, that brings up another idea. The whole notion of doing Batman on screen that Michael Uslan, pushed for 10 years to get 89 made was the idea of doing a dark Batman and getting away from the 1966 Bill Dozier Batman TV series with its inherent satire and camp humor. And 89 does a very good job of that, although it does have some quirkiness in it. But this film, ironically, even though it's an even darker film, because of the extreme quirky humor and the Daniel Waters style that's, is still inherent throughout the whole film, combined with Tim Burton's sensibilities, it really does have quite a lot of the Batman series, right down to the whole subplot, of Penguin running for mayor is literally one of the episodes of Batman 66 where Penguin runs for mayor. So it's ironic that, the darkest Batman film, I think pretty much ever, while this does have great one-liners, great jokes, really demented humor, it's really the darkest film. No other film has the villain trying to kill all the firstborn sons of Gotham and drown a bunch of babies in a watery grave. It was like, no, even Chris Nolan did not go that far. But it doesn't quite play that way, which is interesting. It's dark, but it's also tragic. It's also like a fairy tale. And I think fairy tale is the key term to describe this. It's like a fairy tale for bruised and battered, demented adults with a lot of issues, as we all have a lot of issues. I love the framing here where it's literally like Penguin's got on a soapbox and you can see Max looking up at him, and this is where he's getting the idea, oh, hey, here's my mayoral candidate. I think if I could spin it into that, and then I could get my power plant done. And to talk about demented humor, this whole sequence of the Penguin showing off all the evidence that he's pieced together against Max that's come from the sewer and everything. I love this, everything here, all the details, the toxic sludge. He's like poured into an old thermos, as you can see here, and he just pours it out, and it's this awful green stuff. And Danny DeVito's having a field day. He has such a glee, but also such a pitiable visage. It's such a complete characterization, and with all the makeup and the fat suit he had to wear, all he had to go through to play this part. And it's a key part of the film, and the performance is very underrated because nobody else could do this with this level of malevolence and just wink, wink, nudge, nudge humor that just you have to love the guy, especially this bit here. What happened to Fred? Oh, he's good. He's on extended vacation. And he just pulls his dead hand out. And of course, the Penguin in this film is an odd combination of he wants to be erudite, but he's also, very, very, very rough around the edges, to put it nicely. Eats raw fish, has the black bile coming out of his mouth, is totally a sex crazed maniac. But, you get that feeling like, if things hadn't gone so bad for him, he wouldn't really be a bad guy. Again, that pitiable side is always there. So even when he does terrible things, it feels like it's been justified in a very, very bizarre way. And then capped off the gag here is he's left with a dead hand, and Chris Walken just looks at it. Here we have the super pitiable Selina Kyle. Honey, I'm home. Oh, what? I forgot. I'm not married. I mean, she's so completely pitiable here as the secretary with no social life, and the very drab pink apartment, but it's like a super faded pink, so it's super pathetic. The only friend is her cat who steps out and never chips in on the rent. But also you have the whole notion again of you can't tell what age it is, the old style 50s refrigerator. The whole apartment has a sort of 50s vibe to it, as does her outfit here. And again, you can see, I think, the influence of Tim Burton just coming off of Edward Scissorhands, which is why I think the romance aspect and the whole notion of this being more like a fairy tale, it totally fits in with coming off of Edward Scissorhands, and that gave him more confidence. Plus, the studio basically gave him carte blanche to do whatever he wanted, just so long as he came back and did a Batman sequel. They wanted one lickety split, and Sam Hamm started writing, pretty much right away. But Tim Burton didn't want to do it and kept putting it off, did Edward Scissorhands, and then pretty much threw out the Sam Hamm script. And so it took 3 years instead of 2 years to get the Batman sequel. But it's like, if Warner Brothers wanted Tim Burton to do a Batman sequel and said you could do whatever you want, they should have known they were getting a Tim Burton movie. And here's one of my favorite lines. The party never stops on Selina Kyle's answering machine. The number of times I've used that in real life is far too many. And here we had the fast forwarding through the answering machine messages. This sets up her break later on when she starts trashing the apartment with the pre-recorded message about the perfume and boss at work and Shrek's department store. And this is what drags her to the office, and also shows that she is a super suffering secretary, sort of like the classic trope that you see in a lot of classic era films. That her life sucks and she's kind of forgetful, but she tries, and she's like trying to be a go-getter, which you see here, which unfortunately she does that and says too much to the wrong person, and what should be a commendation is actually her death sentence. And this scene is really well played. It has a very nice humorous undercurrent, although it's very dark, and very quickly the coin flips, and she is in complete mortal peril, which is you can see here she's even kind of got this nervous aspect, like anybody who's trying to impress their boss. I'm like, I did something I shouldn't have, but I hope you like it. And then Shrek has this whole front, but you can see it in his eyes. It's here when he throws the coat over, and Chris Walken has that his eyes don't move, and his eyes look kind of dead. And it's like, yeah, she's not long for this world. Plus, the lighting here is coming from the actual desk here, and it makes Shrek look much more, devilish. The aspects of horror films and German expressionism that Tim Burton brought to Batman '89 are here in spades and returns far more in a lot of ways. This film scared a lot of children originally in '92, which made a lot of parents and again the merchandisers not very happy. This is not really a film for children, but I watched it a lot as a kid, kind of interchangeably with the other ones. But it's always been the special outlier one. It takes a lot of risks and really goes way out there and does its own thing, which it really needs to be commended. And nobody else has really done anything like this before or since, I would argue, in terms of comic book films. And here we have the build-up to, Selina's supposed death, which will turn her into Catwoman by a sort of psychotic break after a near-death experience. And what's really interesting here is the suspense is broken up by, Chris Walken doing the little moment, and it turns it sort of funny for a half second. And here we have the power plant again. Again, the whole notion of the power plant is literally what drives the whole movie. And the line here about, it's not like you can just kill me, which it seems very much a Daniel Waters line. It's a lot like that. And it's really great how it's built here. He comes close for a second. And then, let you get a breather, and then immediately at the right moment, gone. And then here through the banners, it's a great sonic moment. Beautiful composition. And then Shrek just, Now, of course, this is not really explained. So some people always wonder, okay, is there some sort of magical mysticism going on here? But, obviously the cats just find her, and that kind of wakes her up because she's not quite dead yet. And of course, if you listen to Tim Burton's commentary, he goes on and on about how impressed he was in this scene because Michelle Pfeiffer just basically did all this stuff herself, let herself be gnawed by cats, and did the awesome bit where her eyes just like roll up on the back of her head, and she's doing all this without words. But yes, this is definitely a Tim Burton movie. We are still linked to Batman '89, but we're already off in a completely different universe, even though this is still technically a sequel. And again, this is definitely a bit on the freakier side of things. It does have a very chilling effect, which is what makes it work. And her completely dead-eyed face here. This is where the mental break has happened, and here she goes through the motions right down to the "honey, I'm home. Oh wait, I forgot I'm not married." That's a great reveal there. Her face is pale. She has the wound, and she's back in the pathetic apartment. But it's like now everything is meaningless. This is, of course, what sets her character off on the roller coaster ride she goes through on this film. Her arc is really the main character arc of the film that you associate and emote with, and the Penguin takes the primary role of the major villain, although, again, the major villain of the film is actually Max Schreck, which goes back to the whole notion of class warfare that's present in the original Sam Hamm Batman 2. So if you read all the script drafts, you can see how all this stuff kind of flows into another. And one writer was inspired by another writer, and then Wesley Strick came in and kind of like smoothed out all the rough edges at the end. And so you wonder what she's going to do. And this message here not only mentions the boss, which makes her think of Shrek, which starts to freak her out, and then Shrek's department store, which that's what does it, and she can't take it anymore, and she even reaches up towards her head, And now we have the scene where she destroys the apartment, and, obviously they couldn't film this more than once or twice because you would have to replace everything. I love the fact that she's, destroying all the goofy, for lack of a better term, girly things that are all around her apartment. It's, part of a former life or her weaker self, and they just all get destroyed. And then the stuffed animals down the garbage disposal. It's just, it's such a bizarrely wonderful image. And this serves a lot of character purpose because, seeing all this destruction, it's her old self and her old life being discarded and shattered into pieces, like, how her psyche is going to be for the rest of the film. And that is, physically manifested in the, spraying everything black, going from pink to black, separating, dividing, covering. And now she has to create her new skin, which will be the birth of the Catwoman outfit. I like that they tried to explain how she was just going to do this, but, she just goes in and sews it all. I love the changing of the sign to hell here. Again, I like the idea that they try to explain everything. She puts together the costume. It's homemade, and it's a absolutely beautiful design. Of course, you do have to have a little bit of suspension of disbelief, like how can she make a perfect costume out of just a jacket in like, an hour? And how can she, be such a good martial artist that she can take on Batman and beat the crap out of him a couple times? It does take a little bit of suspension of disbelief, but again, this movie is not trying to be realistic. Again, it's like a noir demented fairy tale for adults. It's really what it is. It is a Tim Burton movie 100% all the way through, and I love it for it. It's my favorite thing Tim Burton has ever done. It's demented in all the right places. It's tragic in all the other right places, and it has this wicked sense of humor that, again, blends in the macabre. And while it is, very 1990s in feeling, you definitely wouldn't place this in any other decade. You can't imagine a movie like this getting made again as a major studio release, particularly as a summer tentpole, because it has to be remembered this was Warner's big summer movie of '92, and here we have Catwoman fully formed. And again, the level of performance Michelle Pfeiffer goes to in all the various phases of Selina and Catwoman is just astonishing. And I think that's what most people take away from the film nowadays when they go to it, is the Selina's character arc and all the different facets that Michelle Pfeiffer has. But also, I think the romantic angle is built up very nicely between Selina and Bruce, and there's that element of tragic romance that adds such a dramatic weight to the film, particularly the ending, which is my favorite part of the whole movie. Probably my favorite part of any Batman or comic book film, if I had to choose. So here we have the birth of the Shrek Penguin plot, where it's... And of course, it's to the audience, it's perfectly staged to where, we're all in on the joke, and it's obviously fake as all get out. Of course, the usage of the Red Triangle Gang, which will reappear many times and be the primary focus that Shrek gets Penguin to use as his political platform, which is, of course, very easy since Penguin controls the Red Triangle Circus Gang. There's, of course, Penguin's infamous rubber ducky vehicle, off-roader, Jeep, ATV thing. It does so much stuff. I don't even, and of course it's on a giant scissor lift. Like it's like a Swiss Army knife rubber ducky vehicle. I don't even know what you call it. Here, everybody gets their first well-lit shot of the Penguin, and you really get to see the whole notion of him being, very pale. And I love how he's very sensitive. He's so sensitive to the flash bulbs here, and it's like, guys, stop taking pictures. He might drop the baby. And you get to see the flippers, and he's really playing up the whole pathetic deformed creature of the sewers here. And Shrek gets right in there to be in the photos, and it's immediately he's right in there because he's going to be the new golden boy of Gotham, and Shrek's going to make sure of that. Now here we see Bruce and Alfred for the first time since the opening, and Bruce is extremely pensive as he stares at Penguin talking about his parents, and you can see it touches something in Bruce, but he's not spouting a bunch of dialogue, so it's all in Keaton's face and performance, which is if you look at the Bruce Wayne of this film and the Batman of this film, he's very hunted. He's still a very messed up individual. He's still dealing with the after effects of Batman '89. He's grown as a character, but he's a lot more pensive, which of course leads a lot of people to say Batman's more like a supporting character. But I think they miss a lot of that nuance and that depth because Keaton purposely cut down a lot of the dialogue. And again, it's a lot of emoting and a lot of stuff going on behind the surface, which you can see right here. And you still have the sort of distracted Bruce as outsider. And I love how he always speaks in kind of broken sentences with different levels of emotion. And I gotta say, it's also very funny that Bruce Wayne always just has like a giant rear projection TV in the middle of Wayne Manor, just like sitting there. Same thing you see in Batman Forever. It's like, doesn't he have like an actual TV room or something? So here we have the Hall of Records where, Shrek is making sure nobody goes in to disturb the Penguin. What some people miss here and what's not made very clear is why he's in the Hall of Records doing all this stuff. He's not looking for his parents, which, is why Batman is suspicious, and his suspicions are correct. But what he's actually doing is gathering the names of all the firstborn sons of Gotham for his revenge plot later on, which is why he's inside looking all malevolent. And if you look at the papers, you see the little baby footprints in the family records. So he's not looking for his own. He's looking at all of the babies he's going to go and kill, which is, very demented and very dark. But that's what he's actually doing here. If you look, all the names are different. He's just going alphabetically, and he's like, nope, that's secondborn. Damn it, nope, that's not the firstborn. So he's in the first name G's right now. The Batcave has definitely grown and expanded, larger budget for design. They did keep the very sparse, design of the Anton Furst Batcave, but it's a lot bluer, and there's more gadgets here. Bruce is in front of a microfilm reader. I love this scene. It's totally random. I quote this all the time, the Vichyssoise, it's supposed to be cold. It's just a nice little character bit between Bruce and Alfred that shows them as normal people. They're always supposed to have some banter, even in some of the later scripts, but a lot of that usually kind of gets dropped. But it's one of those little things like in '89 when Bruce is going around the party and Alfred saves him from making all the faux pas. It also shows, Bruce's complete focus on what's going on. And Alfred is, again, the angel on his shoulder, being his conscience, going, why are you digging into this penguin thing? Like, what's up? And, of course, it's just because something in Bruce's mind, something doesn't ring true, something is off. And he digs and digs and digs until he finds the article about missing children, and they shut down the circus, but one performer vanished. And, of course, he had just said there was an aquatic bird boy. So you can put two and two together, but it's not expressly spelled out. So that's another thing in the film that's very subtextual. You can blink and miss it, but it's there. Now, Batman is patrolling here, and he's still operating on his suspicions, which is why he drives past and just kind of stares at the Penguin through the window. This whole sequence is beautifully shot. The shot of Batman through the window of the Batmobile with the snow going and the light blue, the light cold blue of the night lighting is just it could be hung in a museum. It's just beautifully done, and of course, all of this was done by hand on these wonderful refrigerated sets. People don't try to do real snow anymore. You can easily just CG it, and here we go with that shot. I love that, and he just stares at the Penguin inside, who's just working away, going to kill all the babies. It actually shows Batman having hunches and trying to learn stuff. Here we have a photo op, a press opportunity of Penguin going to find his dead parents and all this stuff, and basically playing it for all it's worth, because he's being led and groomed by Shrek, who already is preparing to have him be the mayor. Now, if you go along with the idea that Penguin already knows who his parents were, this is all a sham and all a gag. But something that's alluded to in some of the scripts, and there's a line in the novelization as well, where he goes and he looks at the Cobblepot's grave and he's like, oh, they were so wonderful and they were so rich and so in love and they mysteriously died together so young. So it's insinuated that Penguin murdered his own parents, which is a touch I wish was in the film. I love that idea that he's already gotten his revenge on his parents that threw him out. You don't need to see him killing his parents, but I loved that idea. It's just not in the film anywhere, but it's something you'll stumble across if you dig into the other versions of the story, it's an extra layer that I really, really liked. This is one of the scenes where you see the really nice, cold, filtered blue light coming through that on the UHD release is a little on the teal side, which it really shouldn't be. And seeing this in a theater on a release print, this would also be, very, very dark, very saturated in color. But again, the earlier video versions are brightened up significantly. And coming up here is an example of one of the lines you may blink and miss. It starts out very, very composed, true, I was their number one son, but they treated me like number two, which is something you'll see Penguin do in this film a lot, where it's sort of like the trying to have the civilized visage, but underneath he's still extremely uncouth, and he's still the Penguin, but he tries to put on the airs of the Oswald Cobblepot. So that also is a sort of psychological thing, because when the mayor thing's on the up and up, he refuses to be called Penguin. He yells at his gang, I am Oswald Cobblepot. But when he's betrayed by Shrek, when Gotham City throws him out, and he's on the run, they call him Oswald, and he yells at him, and, it hits him. It's like, I am Penguin. I am not human. I am an animal. Cold-blooded. Crank the AC. And there's Elizabeth Sanders, who is the wife of Bob Kane, and that's her first real appearance in these films. Later on, she plays Gossip Gertie, the gossip reporter in the two Schumacher films. Here's the first appearance of Catwoman, and of course, she not only beats up the mugger, but actually, starts chewing out the victim, and basically because it reminds her of how pathetic she used to be in her own life as Selina. And this is the whole tic-tac-toe cutting of the face and the way she looks in the close-ups has that demented vibe, and you can't quite get a read on her. So Catwoman in this movie is just like, she has this danger, and you can tell she's completely unhinged by this point. And, there had never been a Catwoman like this before, just like the Penguin. So both are really complete reinventions for the movie, which really adds a freshness and a vibrancy to it, which I think is what makes it special. Here we have Bruce confronting Shrek. This is really the first time you have Bruce Wayne, acting crusader for justice in his civilian guise. He would have been at the press conference in '89, but he was absent as Batman, which is why the empty name tag was there. And Keaton plays this very flippantly, but he's, definitely going toe-to-toe with Shrek here. I love how he just tosses the report over, and he knows the power plant thing is a fraud. But you can see, this is how the Keaton Bruce Wayne would attack things in the boardroom. He might be a bit distracted. He might be Bruce Wayne. He might be Batman at night. But, Bruce Wayne in the comics will also try and do the right thing and try and do what Batman would do in his Bruce Wayne guise. So you can see here, he doesn't back down. He's not a pushover, as some versions of Bruce Wayne are going to be. And, he actually says, I'm going to fight you on this. I've spoken to Mayor. We see eye to eye. And then Walken just takes it as Shrek and just runs with it. And then here he name drops Cobblepot and the linkage, but he also go ahead and says that he's a crime boss, which is maybe a bit much because, only Batman might be digging into that, but it's also maybe a sign that Bruce Wayne does his own research and does his own, maybe has some evidence to use against Shrek. And then we have Selina come in beautifully set up, which totally freaks Max out. And this is really the third character that Michelle Pfeiffer is playing. So there was Selina version 1, there's Catwoman. This is really Selina version 2, where, she's still the same person, but it's a completely different rendering because this is post-trauma where she has the confidence of Catwoman, but still the original, version 1 Selina slips through, and in the more intimate moments, you can see all these sides kind of blend together and different parts come in and out, particularly most obviously in the scenes with Bruce. And you can see already how taken he is with her with this little, awkward dialogue, which is well played. And, it seems natural enough because they have to explain the, injury away and stuff. There was a dropped bit where Bruce comes in the scripts and novelization where he glances at the broken window and Shrek's like, all those kids outside, the gang broke the window. And Bruce is like, no, they didn't. All the glasses, there's no glass on the inside. And Shrek's like, what? And, it's another little thing where it's like, yeah, that's something Batman would notice. And Bruce Wayne notices it. There's a couple little things like that. And then the whole thing about remembering the stuff from childhood that Selina's rambling through is kind of random, but then ends in, he's dead now. Couldn't you just die? And, of course, Shrek has to read into that, is she trying to blackmail me? Is she playing with me? Or is she literally an amnesiac now and just, going nuts? Which, if you want to get nuts, she's with the right guy. Sorry, I couldn't resist. And Chip looks dumbfounded, as he does practically in the rest of this movie. Here is the first time Bruce and Selina really start to talk to each other, and the walls start to come down a little bit of the public personas. You can say they have a mutual attraction, and this is a funny little bit where, she goes away and then Bruce gets stuck on the elevator. There's an extra bit in the novelization where he actually has to go back and get her phone number, and he finds her squeezing her wound on her hand. She's squeezing the blood out into Shrek's cup of coffee. And he just looks at her, and she's like, putting my blood into it. And there's the wonderful line, drop her out a higher window, about a fish to fry. There's the Volkswagen, and there's more Volkswagens in the back. Once you notice that, it's very hard to not notice. This is a split diopter shot to get focus on all planes. You can tell the trademark fuzziness there on that central column and the top of the legal pad on the Penguin's desk. There's one or two of the split diopter shots in this film, but this is really the main one. I guess Tim Burton wanted to keep the whole thing in focus, and they had to achieve it by using a split diopter, which is really it's a lens attachment, sort of a cheat method to get two planes in focus in both the foreground and background. Of course, I love the Red Triangle Gang is just hanging out there. Penguin's working on his Kill the Firstborn Sons of Gotham plot, and Shrek is about to unfurl his Run for Mayor plot. And just to show how demented this movie can get, this is the bit where Shrek has a raw fish and uses it to entice the penguin out, which is, again, not something they probably expected in the Summer Popcorn Batman 89 sequel. But again, they said, hey, Tim, we'll cut you a blank check. Go do whatever you want. And it's like, well, what'd you expect? And, of course, Danny DeVito literally goes for it and eats it, in some of the featurettes on the DVD, it's like, man, they had a lot of great fish. I love sushi, so it was great. You could just chow down on raw fish. And apparently he did stay in character for most of the shoot, so I can find that believable. So you can just imagine, in between takes, there's the penguin sitting there still. Here we have the Run for Mayor campaign. I think it's also interesting that if you look at the poster, it's much more the comic style, classic penguin look with the top hat. umbrella and cigarette holder, which they reference here with the political consultants and, reclaim your birthright, he says, as he puts in the cigarette holder. Of course, Penguin kind of dumps the cigarette holder, but then adopts the top coat and he already has the umbrellas, but he keeps the top hat for the mayoral prospect. I love here how they just kind of step to the side and discuss it seriously. And even Penguin, even though he's lived in the sewers, he's like, it's December, they have elections in November. And Shrek's like, that doesn't matter. We have image consultants. like this is a legitimate political campaign, right down to the mudslinging and the corruption, 100%. This is one of the key scenes where you can see Penguin is not really one meant for the society of Gotham in his current state. His decorum leaves something to be a lot to be desired. And this is the moment that probably terrified the most children and is the most un-merchandising friendly bit. You couldn't really sell Penguin action figures with bile coming out of the mouth with a consultant action figure getting his nose bitten off. It's like it's a very striking scene. You might be surprised at first, but it does kind of fit the demented darkness of the character, and it's over pretty quick. And then I love how Shrek just tries to wave it all off. All right, let's make a mayor, guys. It's gonna be great. Wear a nose guard. And they step over to the water cooler like they're having an office chat. And Shrek just comes out, it's like, I got plans. I can do whatever I want, but, I want you to totally be my, fall guy. And he completely manipulates Penguin here, beautifully so, knowing exactly what Penguin will and won't know. And then finally, the last straw and what convinces Penguin is the unlimited poontang. And it's just a bizarrely humorous touch that you're not going to find in most movies. This is, of course, where they also hammer out to have the plot of the mayoral campaign have the Red Triangle Circus Gang run Gotham into the ground and not only cause the mayor to look bad, but also, distract Batman as well. And then that will be the campaign platform for Oswald to ascend to mayordom, where then he can say, okay, we're going to push this power plant through because, Bax got me here, and I have to be grateful to him. And, that seems kind of convoluted just to get the power plant through, but, Shrek is a very scheming, planning character. You get a lot more of his inner monologue in the novelization, which the inner monologues of the characters are the best part of the novelization. So that's why I really recommend it if you wanted more of the nuance of Batman Returns. But all of this stuff is there in the film, but you just kind of have to read all the subtext like you do in 89. But plot-wise, you have to read a lot more subtextually because it's not 100% focused on plot all the time. And then Penguin just says, drive a hard bargain. All right, I'll be mayor. And that's it. They just go with it. And that sets up the transition to the semi-montage of the circus gang destroying the city, but completely whimsically, you have a poodle dropping a hand grenade. It's like it doesn't get quirkier than a poodle with a hand grenade. And this is one of the bigger Batman action sequences in a Tim Burton Batman film. He himself describes many times in the commentaries he's not an action director, so this is really one of the biggest fights that Keaton gets as Batman. And it's a lot more physically impressive than the fights in 89. They redesigned the bat suit quite a bit, so he has more flexibility. It was a bit easier to move around in. Still not easy. He's really had to perfect the bat turn here. They also improved the design. They changed it. He doesn't have the muscles that are sculpted, but it's got, as they describe, it's a more automotive, industrial type design on the chest piece. You can see the sort of louvered type pieces. But it's subtle cues, but you start to pick up on it. The Batmobile's the same, but they did revamp the bat suit. And then the gag of there's the poodle. Here we have one of the few CGI shots in the film of the remote control batarang. This was very early in the days of CGI, but there's a couple usages here which are, interestingly done. You kind of wonder why Batman doesn't try to get his batarang back, but he does get interrupted. But that's, of course, going to come back later when they use the batarang to frame Batman for killing the Ice Princess. Here we have Catwoman having her romp through the city and taking a tour of Shrek's department store after hours. And then this is one of the iconic shots of the film where she's framed in the cutesy mascot of Shrek. Of course, a demented, completely evil, ruthless businessman would have a super cute, marketable logo, which I don't know if that's saying something about consumerism. I'm sure it is. Michelle Pfeiffer did learn all of the whip techniques, so this is actually her doing, practically all this stuff with the whip and doing a lot of the gymnastic moves herself as well, I believe, for a good portion of it. She just has a ball doing this. You can't help but grin at this stuff. And she doesn't really have a purpose for doing this stuff. You kind of wonder, well, why doesn't Catwoman steal stuff? But that's not really the point of this. And here with the two security guards, she has the line, always confusing your pistols with your privates. Again, that's the sort of notion about Selina's Catwoman getting back at all of the men who wronged her in her past life or, tried to control her, dominate her, use her and throw her aside. So there's this whole notion of Catwoman is a sense of female empowerment as well. Now here we have the most commented on scene in the film where Batman ostensibly kills the circus strongman. And again, I don't have a problem with this because it's beautifully set up. Keaton looks wonderfully psychotic in the mask here. Glances down. There's the bomb attached to him. Right there. Yeah. Punches him down the manhole, then walks away, and then boom. This is still very much a 1939-esque Batman, a Shadow-esque Batman, which is how the character started. Picks right up from 89, so again, I don't have a problem with Batman killing people. But it is interesting, and Forever, they immediately, because it started as a Return sequel, they brought him to be more of a no-killing Batman, which is what happened, when Robin came in 1940-41. Here we have the confrontation with the Penguin, which is one of my favorite dialogue scenes in the film. Keaton did cut down a lot of the lines here, so Batman's very monosyllabic, but I love it. Particularly, Penguin talking about gravely assessing the devastation, and then Batman's, you're not the mayor. And then the whole things change back and forth is the Batman saying things change at the end of this scene is one of my favorite Batman lines in any Batman movie. It's the first time they're confronting each other face to face, and all of the dialogue here has a richness. And, of course, the photography here is beautiful. Batman's still kind of cloaked in shadow over the eyes as well. Things change. He says it with a sort of smile. And then we have the iconic Catwoman completing the trio and having one of the great introductions. Yeah. The explosion being another one of the moments where you can tell this was the first Dolby Digital 5.1 release. It's amazing how fast she can climb up the side of a building with just some claws. And, this is a touch much more like the comics with the, sort of helicopter bladed umbrella, but you have to wonder, how did Penguin develop a helicopter umbrella? If he had patented that, he probably could have made millions. But anyway, suspension of disbelief. I love the shot of Catwoman just standing here, swinging the whip. Like she's just having a ball playing around. Now, this scene here with Batman is their first fight. And again, without knowing that Selina had any sort of martial arts training, it's like, how the heck did she beat up Batman? And he seems like kind of outmatched, which is kind of bizarre because he's being beat up by an ex-secretary. But he is kind of hesitant to fight back. And then when he does, she does the whole, how could you, I'm a woman thing, which again is playing on the whole notion of sexual politics that keeps popping up with the Catwoman character. And then she turns it on its head, I'm a woman and not to be underestimated. And in their first confrontation, in the span of like a minute or two, she's already got Batman dangling, which is, it does say something, but you got to wonder, it's like, man, that must have been one heck of a fighting class. It's a little unclear what happens here, but Batman basically throws a sort of acid bomb at her, which is what gives her the scar and then causes her to slip and slide. So then he saves her. But then later on, when she stabs him and he knocks her away, he didn't intend to knock her off the building, but then she takes that as another man who killed one of her 9 lives, and that sets her against Batman for the next reel or two of the film. And this is very, very, very not typical summer movie stuff. The whole sexual undercurrent that is rampant through the film is really, really obvious. So again, he backhands her, and then he's like, "Oh crap!" And then this is just a wonderful, goofy touch, saved by kitty litter. And of course, the gag is that her costume gets ripped up more and more each time because it's literally homemade. She has to go home and sew it. Whereas Batman has the Batcave, and he can just replace all his costumes with all the spares. But this is really the first and only time you have Batman come back bruised and battered, but he's sitting there in the bat suit and he's got the cowl on. So it's a very strange and striking image. And I love how, it's like Alfred says, "Are you injured, sir?" And he's like, "Oh no, not really." And he's got some blood on him and everything, but he's very pensive here because he's pensive throughout the whole movie. It should be called Batman Pensive. Licks his tongue a little and then, yeah. I absolutely love that moment. Here we have the unfurling is Penguin starts his mayoral campaign and is as corrupt as the best of politicians, and it's his only first go-round. Using the whole "I saved the mayor's baby" thing right out of the gate. It's like, did he listen to How to Give Political Speeches 101 on tape overnight? Again, you have all the posters with the sort of classical-looking penguin from the comics, so it's kind of cool that they used that in the film. And here we have the penguin groupies. There's a little bit extra in the novelization where he thinks about how cool it is that he has penguin groupies now, and how when he's mayor, he can have fun with all his penguin groupies. And he's deliciously creepy here and very, 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 dirty old man. And then we get the super penguin line as he goes up the stairs, about the, politics isn't about reaching out. Politics is about reaching out to people, touching people, groping people. And then my name's not Penguin, it's Oswald Cobblepot. And Catwoman has now come to align with Penguin. Here's another diopter shot. You can tell there's a little haze and softness on the top of Catwoman here, but the foreground and background are in focus. It's amazing how shiny the costume is in certain scenes. Like I'm sure they oiled it up a lot, and she had to be vacuum sealed into the costume every time, so it was extraordinarily uncomfortable. Again, you have the sexual politics all throughout this scene. Probably confused a lot of children for sure seeing this in 92. But again, this is not really a movie for children. There's a lot of adult stuff going on here, but again, the younger kids are not really going to get a lot of that. I certainly didn't as a kid. I rewatched this movie hundreds of times on VHS tape for sure, but I think kids pick up much more on the whole fairy tale aspect of it. And there you see the list of names there, which is the names of the children. And in a minute, Catwoman will look at it, and be like, "Not even in office yet, and you're already a politician." And he's like, "Those are not for prying eyes." There's the plans of the Batmobile, which it's like, how in the heck did the gang get a hold of that? The novelization adds a line that, they bribed somebody at a company who designed it or helped build it, and I guess it was all done by proxy, but it's like, if Penguin could figure that out, you would think he could figure out where the Batmobile went. But anyway, that's kind of an aside that, you're kind of just not supposed to question. How can they tear apart the Batmobile? How are they tech wizards? And there she went to the list of names, and now Penguin is questioning who the heck she is, and goes buy into that pony when she turns sweet 16. And I love the way that they're framed in the birdcage here. It's just a wonderful visual image. And now she's going to take Penguin's pet bird and do a very cat-like move and actually, stick it in her mouth. And again, Tim Burton and anybody who sees this film is kind of struck at how, Michelle Pfeiffer literally did this for real. I think they did 2 takes, Tim Burton said in the commentary, but she literally puts a live bird in her mouth and holds it there. No birds were harmed or anything, but it's not everybody's going to do that. Which is probably why her lipstick is a little smudged there, because I'm sure it was not easy with a bird. And I love how here she just comes clean, and she's got all these grievances against Batman, and that's what sells Penguin. Although Penguin is still looking to just score with Catwoman, for lack of a better term. And then the Penguin theme comes up here as a very ominous note. And then to cap off the scene, again, with that very dark sexual vibe, Catwoman gives herself a bath because she feels so dirty. I guarantee you no one else could have gotten this through in a studio movie. The Catwoman licking herself. And here we have the second. Bruce looks at his big rear projection TV in front of the very Citizen Kane-like fireplace. And Alfred has the wonderful joking line about the love connection, perhaps. But you can see in the posture Keaton has here as Bruce, here he is much more suspicious. He knows Penguin is up to something. And then he has the line when, it's an obvious call to Batman, and he's chomping down, and he's like, subtle. I love how Selina's introduced here. She's literally talking to herself. Why are you doing this? She's totally out of her entire element, which makes her seem very much like Bruce Wayne and the sort of out of place, distracted outsider Bruce Wayne that Keaton portrays, which is really why they're a match made in screwed up people heaven. This is sort of, I guess, I meet cute. This is the first time they meet again, and like Bruce says, they're out in the real world. It's cool how they weave in their alternate identities when they pass the newspapers, and they talk about Batman and Catwoman like they're defending them, and anybody might go, well, why are you talking about them that way? Are you them? But it's just enough to be cutesy for the audience. Batman blows it. I mean, he probably saved millions in property damage alone. So this is what sets up Bruce inviting her to come watch the tree lighting ceremony, even though they totally make fun of it. They're like, oh, wouldn't be caught dead there. But then, 2 seconds later, they're like... It's also fun that, Selina says hot time on the cold town tonight, because that links back to Joker saying the same line when he sings it in Batman 89. Apparently that was supposed to be worked in some of the Akiva Goldsman scripts on the Schumacher films, but... it just didn't make it in, but it's a line that I guess people chose to carry on for some reason. And this sets up the Wayne Manor date, but of course that's going to be interrupted because they both have, places to go. They're not going to be caught dead at the tree lighting ceremony, but their alter egos are going to be at the tree lighting ceremony. I love how ditzy the Ice Princess is. She's, wait, press the button, then the tree lights up. And the gag of Penguin pretending to be a talent scout, she just goes for it. It's just so goofy. It works. So this sets up the kidnapping, where eventually the Penguin is just going to kill her anyway. So the framing of Batman is something that actually goes all the way back to the Sam Hamm drafts, where it was a lot more... a lot more developed. Penguin and Catwoman go around and they actually kill off the, wealthy 5 family sons or heirs, and collect those statues to find the secret treasure fortune. But, Catwoman like slits their throats and leaves a bat symbol in their blood on the wall to frame Batman. So it's a lot more in depth, but that's another idea of Sam Hamm's that carried over to Batman Returns. This whole scene is beautifully shot. It's got warm color of the reds and the fireplace, and it's beautifully played. Where again you have these 2 outcasts of society, which is something Tim Burton is fond of tracking down and examining closely in detail in his films. And those are the main characters of both his Batman films. You have some nice reference to Vicky Vale. Told her everything. And I love how, when he names her, that cracks Selina up. It's like, Vicky? Oh, come on. And Bruce is actually, being very forthcoming and, talking about issues with duality, that might, freak out any normal person. But, it like rings the right bells with Selina. And you can see, her interest is piqued. You can see it in her eyes. And they're on the same wavelength, which is something that obviously doesn't happen for Keaton's Bruce Wayne. Practically, ever. And there's a certain tragic pitiableness that these 2, scarred souls are, finding some sort of compassion in one another. That's of course going to be short-lived. And it just builds. It's one of the great scenes of the film that really makes it special. And then Selina has the great line, it's the so-called normal guys let you down. Sickos never scare me. At least they're committed. And the person's like, oh, okay, well, okay. And then she just goes right in. It's a complete night and day difference from the Selina we first saw. And you can see Bruce is just kind of taken aback that he's encountered such a character. And here we have the fun bit of almost discovering each other's scars, which it's like, well, what would happen if they do discover each other's identities? What would it really matter? But obviously it would matter to the Catwoman side of Selina. So but they both have this sort of gut reaction to immediately push that away. Even though, to either one, they could obviously say, oh, I, hit a door or I injured myself somehow. Now, this is going to, break up this wonderful romantic scene. And this is the only other thing Gordon really has to do. It doesn't mean anything. It's a bloodstained batarang, but I'm going to show it on the camera right in the TV screen. Now, when Keaton runs away here, I love how his feet kind of slide here, and he's like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, oh yeah, Alfred, I need help. There's been a kidnapping. I gotta go." And Alfred's like, "I'd hope you'd snub him." But the call is already there because there's been a kidnapping, so Bruce and Batman, compelled to go. And Selina's like, "Oh crap, I gotta go. Catwoman's supposed to be downtown." And this is such a fun gag where, both Bruce and Selina are trying to figure out how to express their feelings, but they can't. And they manage to get the idea across to Alfred, who will be like, "I will relay the message." And then Selina has a really telling line here where she says, Bruce, tell him he makes me feel the way that I hope I really am, which is a really deep line that, would, if anybody said that in real life, your eyebrows would go up, like, as Alfred's do, kind of like, huh? Yeah, here's the line. And then she ends with, "Could you just make up a rhyme? Dirty limerick. One has just sprung to mind." Alfred is the perfect point man for all of the goings on in Wayne Manor. Here we have the super advanced Bat Vault of costumes, where it's really funny. There's all these Bat costumes on a rack, but then just a clothes rack of various Bat suits, the row of boots, and then that's hilariously juxtaposed with Selina driving her little crappy car, pulling out the Catwoman costume that she's tried to stitch back together, whereas Bruce can just, I want cowl number 45. I'm going to take boot number 3. whereas Selina's, trying to drive one-handed, and she puts the mask in her teeth. It's just a fun image, and it sucks being a vigilante when you have no money. Of course, the Batmobile is pretty much the one holdover from '89 that did not get changed around. Here we have the shields, but this time they are, not a Stan Winston effect. They are CGI. The bat shields, the swirling swarms of bats, and the remote control battering earlier. Those are the main CGI shots because, of course, this is still very early on in the usage of CGI in motion pictures, and it was very expensive, very time-consuming, so it was kept to a minimum. And they work fine here, but if you look very closely, you can tell they kind of stick out here. Like when you'll see especially the side shields when they go out really far and go under the car when the gang, you can tell it's an effect if you look very closely. I mean, it still works because it doesn't linger on it and it's well done. But yeah, those especially, you can tell that's an effect shot. Up here on the roof is the one time you get a sense of scale over the Gotham Square. The one problem with shooting this on the Warner stages in LA, while it's a more intimate movie and it's beautifully designed, especially on the brightened up transfers, it shows that there's not a lot of people and Gotham looks kind of small, particularly compared to the Anton Furst '89 Gotham set. It is a lot better when it's properly dark because, it masks a lot of that stuff that was not intended to be seen. But you can't get away from the main Gotham Central Square is a lot smaller in scale and amounts of crowds than the Batman '89. We have this lovely little get together between Batman and Catwoman. High fiber. Batman here actually has some one-liners, which is very different from the Batman '89, but also it does show some slight growth and Keaton having some little bits of humor with it, but it's primarily confined to the Catwoman scenes, which is sort of like the dark parallel to the Bruce Selina romantic scenes. And of course, this whole thing is a setup just to drag Batman into a scenario, which he knows, the audience knows, but neither the Batman or the audience knows exactly how it's going to turn out, which... Catwoman is led to believe that, they just kidnapped the Ice Princess. They're going to frame Batman. But, Penguin is just out to straight up murder her and frame Batman for her murder, which he does right here. I love the reasoning of the Ice Princess here. You would think that Batman would just, hurry up and throw a line or something to get her off of there. But, of course... Penguin uses the bats to knock her off. And, of course, Batman then kind of stupidly goes up there like, hey. And we have the one guy to spell out that it looks like Batman killed her. And then she hits the box, lights the tree, and there's a bunch of bats in it, almost as if it was planned. But this combined with the Elfman score, it's a beautiful image. And then Penguin just ducks behind the ear, and then before Gordon can do anything, they shoot. Batman gets shot, so he's not having a good night. You gotta wonder why the police don't hurry up down there, but there's enough time for Catwoman to have this really striking moment where she literally just climbs on top of Batman and then plants a tongue lick right on his face. Again, while it's a very sexualized moment, it's also very dark and has that tragic element to it. And this is where we get the great line about mistletoe can be deadly if you eat it, and a kiss can be even deadlier if you mean it, which is this great back and forth line that is appropriately dark enough. And again, that's a very messed up moment. She just licks his face, but it's also, and then his tongue comes out and like licks where she licked him. And Batman says, "I tried to save you," and it just. Maybe she'll retire. So it does play into his notion of being tired, being exhausted. And she tries to stab him again, except now he's much more prepared for it. Now Batman goes to use the glider, which is something that was in the various script drafts, but here when he uses it to get away, he goes over the crowd in a very, atmospheric and striking shot, but it's like, why would Batman do that? Because it just makes it look worse to the crowd who thinks he just killed the Ice Princess. This is a really Tim Burton-y shot. It's that overhead shot of Batman's head kind of looking like a bat, very reminiscent of the introduction in Batman '89 where he moves on the top of the building. A little strange that the Penguin's gang can just tear apart the Batmobile and put a remote control device in 5 minutes, put it all back together. Now, Penguin thinks he can consummate the deal with champagne and that, Catwoman is totally into him when, he is sorely mistaken. And Catwoman is like, she was just going to be scared. Well, it's not what I signed up for. I love how Penguin has thought all this stuff out about how Catwoman's going to come in with their tail twitching in the mayoral mansion. And she just cuts him off. And he immediately leaps into anger because he's been betrayed once more. And then tries to kill her with the copter umbrella, which... not the simplest method of killing somebody, but, when you think about it, probably a terrible way to go because, the body's own weight is strangling you, just like being hung, but you're just flying through everywhere. And it's a very striking singular image of, a woman in a very clinging suit, flying through the air, and then she crashes into the greenhouse, which is another one of her lives gone, and... I love how her hair comes through the broken mask, so it's like Selina poking through, and another image of her fractured psyche. And comes down and rolls out of the glider, and I guess just leaves it. And here we have the Penguin or Batmobile rampage sequence. Love how he already has his own, RV. And the best touch of this is the fact that his remote control device is in a Bat-O-Ride, just like the little children's 50-cent car ride outside of any department or convenience store or something. There's more Volkswagens, obviously. Told you they were everywhere. And then immediately the screen cuts on. The Oswald Cobblepot School of Driving. Forgot to say my license is expired. And it's a very creepy thing to have Penguin's face right there, very close in a TV monitor. And, struggling in a mock-up cockpit is not easy, so Keaton does a very good job as Batman, staying in character doing this. And Penguin is just having a field day, bile coming out, screaming and cackling, just trying to cause wanton destruction. And I love the fact he's bouncing all around, and this thing is literally on springs because it's a children's kiddie car. It's just a bizarre, whimsical touch. The novelization goes into Batman's mindset as he's really struggling in this sequence, and so it is cool to get that, but it's still the same thing. Of course, it's interesting to think that he decides to pop in a CD to start recording the Penguin as he's trying to not die. This, of course, sets up the signal jamming sequence where he replays the Penguin's own words against him. And here you see the armor on the Keaton Batmobile being able to take out a whole street full of cars. Of course, because this is the smaller Gotham, they're having to, use whatever streets are possible. So the Batmobile's not getting up to speed, but they do a really good job at making it look like it's going really fast and using the available space and getting the camera in really close, which helps, again, to mask that, the Returns Gotham is, not the massive Anton First 89 Gotham. And the whole RV is just rolling around. Now, here is where Batman punches through the floor of the Batmobile. Some fans have a problem with this. Like, how could Batman punch through steel? Well, he's punching through the floorboard, and the novelization goes a bit further and says that he punches through one layer and he reaches some access hatch, and then he's feeling all around. And one of the earlier drafts, he manages to pull somewhere to get it worked on, and there's a young mechanic there who helps him remove the device, and then hops in the car to get away from Penguin, and of course it's Dick Grayson, and who becomes Robin. And Robin was in most of all the early drafts, but for the Batman Returns that Tim Burton was trying to do, it was really kind of cramming him in there. So I think Robin worked in the Batman 2 Sam Hamm script really well, but in all the other drafts where they tried to work in Robin, it just felt shoehorned in. So now the Batmobile's in tatters, and we have the Bat Missile moment. This is probably the one time as Batman, outside of the ending of this film, where Keaton really shows his internal emotion, where he's like, where he gets worried, and he's like, all right, now I'm a little worried, and he drops the Batman voice. Of course, it's believable because it's a near-death scenario, but it's an interesting, quirky choice to have Batman totally drop the Batman voice when he's in real danger. And then Batman manages to get away in the Bat Missile, so that's one of 2 extra special new vehicles that we get in Returns, although it's not exactly a new vehicle. Bladder control. A lot of the one-liners and humor spits are kind of blink and you miss it, and you may not get it the first time, but over time you discover more and more. So this is the mayoral speech. You have Shrek basically giving him a pep talk like it's before a boxing match. And again, all of this for the power plant that really hasn't been mentioned since the beginning of the film. The signs out there are quite cute, cleaning up Oswald. Oswald means order. This is more of the fickle side of the citizenry of Gotham that's, was also in stuff like the store that sold Batman merchandise. And then when Batman was framed, it was going to be shown stocked with Penguin plushies and Penguin, merchandise. I like how Selina's just watching this, much like Bruce watches everything at home, as an outsider. Nice to see they're not at the, big rear projection TV in the fireplace room. And here is the line for all comic fans. Who let Vicky Vale into the Batcave? I'm just sitting down there working. I turn around and I'm like, oh, hi, Vic. Which is... it's totally fourth wall breaking. It's a total jab back at all the fans who complained about Alfred letting Vicky into the Batcave. I love that it's here, and it works because the film has the quirky Daniel Waters humor through it. I'm not sure who wrote the line or if it was added on set, but it's such a great callback that I really appreciate it. The entrance to the Batcave being inside an Iron Maiden is a sign of Bruce being the tortured soul and everything, and it closes over him. Of course, it's not the classic comic, grandfather clock turning the hands to the exact time, but I really like it, and it's a nice hidden entrance that's not going to be found, obviously. Here we have the jamming sequence, which will also play in the climax of the film when Alfred will do the same and jam the frequency controlling the Penguin Army. And now we have the recordings from the Batmobile Frenzy Ride. And it's kind of interesting how people don't realize that, Penguin isn't actually saying this stuff, and how just a few recorded lines of him saying all this convinces everybody that, he's a fraud. But, the film kind of quickly moves away from it, and Penguin just runs away and, tries to shoot everybody. So that kind of caps it off. The super fancy new technology of the CD, and of course Batman has his own Batman licensed CD player drive. I love when Penguin leans out here and is like, I didn't say that. Again, you would think he would just step away and then be like, that's not me. And coming up here is another bit a lot of people laugh at or don't like, is when Bruce does does a hand movement like a DJ on the CD, and as if he's scratching a record, replaying Penguin's words like he's a club DJ, which, CDs don't really work that way and stuff like that. Yeah, right here. It's too cute. I mean, yeah, you can't help but not like it. It's just one of those little weird grace notes. It didn't really need to be there, but you come to really like it. But I know some people always complain about DJ Bruce and Club Batcave. And then we have this great shot. Shrek's abandoning him, but he's over on the side, and it's really close. And he looks back, and he's like, "Sorry, I'm out of here." And of course, everybody has rotten vegetables and stuff to hurl, and leading Penguin to, I always bring eggs and tomatoes to a speech. So, obviously the campaign could still go on, but he just gets fed up and tries to machine gun the whole crowd, which is really going to end anybody's mayoral campaign. And this is a point where Penguin's character arc, he's totally dropped any semblance of trying to be the respectable human being, and he's just reverting back to his true guise. And this is a callback to the opening of the film. He runs on the same path his parents took to drop him to get back to his Arctic World hideout, but he's actually being shot at, and dives off the same bridge into the same water, which, is where his life really began, when he was, thrown to the icy depths. And that plays into his overall plot of kidnapping and killing the firstborn children of Gotham, because his ultimate goal is to drown them in the very same waters that almost killed him. You can't say that Penguin doesn't care about his penguins. And here we have the mention of Oswald and the complete rejection of Penguin's humanity. He is an animal. Crank the AC. I love that being tagged on. And now he's going to go full tilt into his plan to murder the firstborn children of Gotham, which is so extreme for a movie that, has a dark humor undercurrent that, of course, even one of his Red Triangle henchmen questions it, which, of course, causes said fat clown to be eliminated. And you can definitely tell the element of revenge is there, that, he is going to steal the lives of all these children that lead the lives that he never was able to lead. What's also great is that the shot of the clown, going down to his watery grave, it sets up later that he ostensibly drops a gun, which is the gun that Max Schreck is able to use later in the climax. It's a fun gag where Bruce says he's not interested to go to the Max Schreck costume ball. Alfred rips it up, and he thinks, oh, Selina might be there. And of course, he's actually working on the Batmobile. He's got a sort of jacket for mechanic work on, which is fun. Another nice touch is the song being played is, of course, a instrumental version of Super Freak, which, fits into the fact that, all of the characters of this film view themselves as freaks. The only two who are not costumed in the ball are, of course, Bruce and Selina, who talk about, they're tired of wearing masks, and the whole notion of the dual identity, that the costumed identity is their true self and the daily real person is the mask. Love this exchange between Bruce and Max. It's a pickup of their boardroom confrontation. And then Bruce is like, it matters to me. And then Chris Walker just has the yawn. Just fun. Goody goody. Now here on the stairs, really interestingly, there's a person dressed as the Red Death, which is, a nod to Poe, but also I think Tim Burton put it in because it's a nod to the original 1925 Phantom of the Opera with Lon Chaney, where Chaney appears in the big mass ball sequence, which is in two-strip Technicolor. Selina appears looking wonderful, and we have the romance theme, which is the song for the film, the phenomenal Face to Face with by Susie and the Banshees. Again, not a band you would have composing the theme song for a major studio movie unless you say, hey, Tim Burton, you can do whatever you want. And he was a giant, Susie and the Banshees fan. I love the lighting of this scene, the very golden cast of the lighting, but particularly the underlighting on their faces as they dance, especially the way that it picks up the contours of Keaton's face, particularly the wonderful Batwing-like eyebrows I love talking about. This is my favorite of the dialogue scenes in the film. There's many layers going on. Selina goes through like almost all the different aspects of her persona in this one scene. There's the sexual undercurrent. She literally says there's a big mattress over there and bedding. So it's kind of interesting. How did Trek get his department store repaired so fast? And there's the line about, of course, tired of wearing masks. I thought Bruce is so direct that he's there to see her and no hesitation, and that really gets to her and shakes her, But she has ulterior motives, which again goes into the tragic arc of their relationship, how it's doomed to, not come to fruition. And then when she starts laughing, she goes on for quite a bit, which, makes her seem slightly unhinged, which she is because she pulls out a Derringer, which basically means she's there to kill Max Schreck and permanently end him. And she has this dialogue here that, again, is about, class warfare and how the rich rule and lord over everyone else and always get away with it. And then, who the hell do you think you are? I don't know anymore. Again, the layers here are really, really deep, and this is not what you commonly get in a, summer tentpole. The romance here is so developed over the 89 romance, it's not even funny. And now we have the repeat of the two lines about mistletoe, and then without thinking, Bruce replies the other half and breaks off. And they're very close when this happens, and then he breaks away. And there's that underlighting again. As you see this play out in their eyes and the wheels turn in their head, and then they come back together and keep dancing. There's a facade to be kept up. And then she says, this is me, we have to start fighting. It's like she doesn't know what to do. He doesn't know what to do. And it's a great moment. And unfortunately, it's cut a little short here as the penguin breaks in. If you're watching this on the Laserdisc, this is where the disc break happens, so this is where you'll be getting up to switch to Site 3. When you see films like this on Laserdisc too many times, you get to a point where the side and disc breaks get burned into your memory. Of course, Bruce and Selina are two of the, practically the first to emerge and gain their wits, and of course both are going to slip out of there and get their costume attire gone. I love how Penguin rises out of here and the music swells, and his dialogue here is wonderfully laced with his gritty penguinisms, and he's explaining his plan with all the venom in his voice that he's literally gathering up their children to murder them in cold blood. Joust and dance badly. All these lines make Penguin seem in this film much more like some demented prophet of the sewers, in a strange way, which again goes into the class warfare type thing. And, he talks about Gotham's favorite son. He's come for Chip to torture Max Schreck because he knows Max cares about his son. Now, here's what I mentioned in the beginning. This is the one moment where Schreck has some shred of humanity and sacrifices himself for his own son, which is unexpected, but Walken plays it for everything it's worth. Goes through everything that he did to Penguin to make sure that he will take him. And, it's like, it's a surprising move, but it shows that Max Schreck does have some character to him, some shred of humanity, but that also gets him in the climax, so he can, be in the finale with Selina and Penguin and Batman and everybody. So, it's a way to get him there in the script. But I like that switcheroo there, where Penguin does all this to take the favorite son of Gotham, but Schreck actually sacrifices himself. So it's a nice character moment, and it's unexpected. So I really appreciate that being there. And he's trapped in a giant bird cage, so can't just be tied up somewhere. There you can see the light playing around in the background as well. And here we have the nursery umbrella, which will pop up later. This is where it's introduced, and Penguin's doing this wonderfully morbid dance as he's describing in great detail how he's envisioned all of these children dying.
And then you will join them in your industrial byproduct.
It's just demented in a deliriously morbid, funny way. And they're going around collecting children in this strange train vehicle that's obviously, very very obvious. They're just driving around. Again, this is much like a fairy tale in terms of setup and feeling, and the Red Triangle gang is just doing this. Only one of them questioned it and got shot for it. Batman is introduced off screen, which is always effective, and then we don't need to see anything else, which is very nice. The monkey is left alive, which then he is able to deliver the note to Penguin, which is a wonderfully quirky and cute touch that I love. That's literally a handwritten note with the bat signal.
Sorry, the children won't be able to attend, Batman.
Danny DeVito talked about how eventually the monkey got scared of him in the Penguin get-up, so they had to shoot this little scene like many times to get it right. I love the humor of the wording of that. Batman just sends a note. Well, if you didn't like the black goo in the mouth, well, you got a full screen of it there. Now we have a riff on basically the Patton speech, where Penguin, as sort of a general, speaks to the army of penguins. Of course, there are real penguins, but there's a lot of animatronic penguins. And then I think also there is some CG usage in some of the wide shots of all of the penguin army. So I think there's a little CG in there as well. But it's a lot of really, really convincing animatronic penguins, which is not something that special effects departments get called on to do all the time. And you hear Penguin's various focuses come up in this great rousing speech to the penguin army, right down to his sex drive, where as he's talking about, male and female are equal. I'm not going to worry just about the firstborn, and they're equal with their erogenous zones blown sky high. Now, of course, a bunch of penguins going around with rockets strapped to their backs is bizarre, and it's absolutely ridiculous. But it does fit this in a kind of way, because, again, this film has a sense of being a fairy tale. It is dark, but it is demented, and a whole penguin army with rockets strapped on their backs walking around seems like a very Tim Burton thing. And it's such a striking image that, especially when they're waddling around the city, you haven't seen it before. It's not like you're not getting your money's worth in terms of crazy visuals. So I don't really mind it, but yeah, when you think about it realistically, it is definitely bizarre. Here we have Batman in the Bat Ski Boat, which is the second new vehicle for the film. And, of course, Batman has stuff every occasion. There's more Volkswagens on the street. I know I keep pointing those out, but, again, when I started spotting them, I can't not spot them. Again, not, I think, what people expected for their summer blockbuster, the Climax having a bunch of a whole rocket-wielding penguin army descending on Gotham. But, the plan to do all this, is going to... There's a significant body count, I think they say, estimated to kill 100,000 people. And this is where the whole notion of jamming the frequency signal is going to come back into play, and they will turn the penguins back. The whole bit of the two penguins firing rockets at the Bat-Ski boat, there's a little more than the novelization where it's listed as all the penguins are approaching, and penguins like, oh, great. But two penguins stopped and seemed to discharge their missiles. Oh, I wonder why they stopped. Oh, well, it's probably a misfire. And then, eventually, large vehicle coming very fast, and they realize it's Batman. I also like the fact that the poodle lady is giving the countdown, but she's up in an old igloo because, of course, it was formerly Arctic World, and I guess those bleachers were for the aquatic penguin show or something. But it's just quirky enough that she's up there in an igloo. And, of course, they arrive at Gotham Square. Shrek's store will be destroyed. The whole square will be destroyed. It's like wiping the slate clean. You see the delicious gleam in Penguin's face. It's not enough that they have rockets. They have little helmets with the guided eyepieces that flip down. And it's just simple. Something is wrong. I haven't talked enough about Elfman's score. Again, since the whole film is more intimate, the score is more intimate. It wasn't recorded in London with the big orchestra like the '89 score, but it did have a significant orchestra. But it has a more intimate feel. The character themes are much more developed for Batman, Catwoman, and Penguin, and it has much more of a character and a whimsy to it, which fits this being a pure Tim Burton production. It hits all the right notes here. It's sort of got a march to it, and it does have a quirky vibe because, of course, it's a bunch of penguins running around with rockets on their backs. And then it's playful here when Max tries to lure the monkey over to get the key. So again, it's playful in the right places. It's heroic in the right places. I think it's a more complete work as a score in terms of it's got more emotional content, more themes going on. It's a more layered score than the '89 score. Which doesn't get talked about very much. It's not as, fully iconic as the '89 score, but it does maintain the theme and everything. I love that they're waiting because they know Batman is coming, and then the rest of the gang starts to filter out, and they all stare at Penguin, and they disappear one or two or three at a time. I love it as they cartwheel out. And Penguin is left alone once again. I love the shot of the poodle lady going back to the darkness of the igloo. So Penguin has been betrayed by his entire gang, his family of sorts. Everything has gone wrong, so he's going to go off hot rodding in the rubber duck and trying to escape. Once again, escaping through where he was dumped as a baby. So it ends where it begins once again. I like that Batman here decides to take the shortcut and doesn't just stop Penguin, but, for all intents and purposes should have killed him because he crash lands on top of it and Penguin screams in terror. Now, coming up here in the confrontation is the key line of the film, probably, when Penguin says, "You're just jealous because I'm a genuine freak and you have to wear a mask," to which Batman replies, "You might be right," which, is probably the whole psychological underpinning of what Bruce and Batman felt and had against Penguin. Like, if Batman had a beef against Penguin to begin with. And, Bruce recognizes this within himself. And it's great that we do have Penguin and Batman, about to do battle, and Penguin has the umbrella. Now, this shot here with the radar jamming device, when it pans over to Keaton's eyes, it's a beautiful, beautiful shot that is really striking because, Batman is totally committed and Keaton is committed. And he is out to end this. And Penguin will ostensibly be destroyed by his own babies, his own penguins, and really by his own hand, because he takes the device and, basically Batman manages to make Penguin hoist himself on his own petard. So Penguin presses the button and actually sets off the rockets he intended to destroy Gotham. And here we have the bats swarming around, so Batman is basically doing to Penguin what Penguin did with the Ice Princess. I don't know what it is about the screenwriters having people fall to their deaths in swarms of bats, but again, that was the original Death of Joker in the Sam Hamm Batman 89 scripts. That was how the Ice Princess died, and that is how, Penguin is mortally wounded in this film. It's always fun how we cut back to Shrek. It's like, all this stuff going on, these heavy thematics, and it's like, oh yeah, we forgot Christopher Walken is locked in a birdcage. But somebody else didn't forget. So here we have the entrance of Catwoman into the climax. Now here's the payoff for the fat clown earlier, where Shrek just happens to see in like a split second the gun that he dropped. Of course, you don't actually see the fat clown have a gun, but, I guess he dropped it, and I guess it didn't get waterlogged, of course. But that, of course, is how they got Max a gun to shoot Catwoman. What's really great here is by this point, Catwoman's suit is so torn up and Selina's beyond the point of no return and is totally gone and does not care. And, everything's poking out. She's bruised and tattered already. And you still have the whimsical humor with, big ball of string and things like that. The line launcher's been improved since 89. And it's a great heroic shot of Batman coming in on the line here as the cape flails out. The direct approach of Batman here is great, as the way he marches in. But, Selina is on her own crusade, and there's nothing that Batman or Bruce can do to stop it, though he tries and appeals to, the person that he cares about, not realizing that it's really in vain. Of course, it's interesting that when Batman does reveal himself, he does it in front of Shrek, he's ostensibly taking to jail, but maybe he's going to intend on giving up being Batman, because here he doesn't even care that Shrek is there. He's so emotionally committed to Selina, and he cares so deeply about her. This is where the tragic arc of their relationship comes to fruition, and it culminates in Bruce ripping the mask off, which is it's Bruce's emotional climax in the film, where he says, "We're the same," split down the center. And of course, everybody likes to point out when they cut back, Keaton doesn't have the eye makeup on, because then he pulls the mask off, and it would look silly if he has like makeup. He would look like he has raccoon eyes. I don't mind it because it's very brief and it makes sense. But yeah, he would have still had the eye makeup on. And it's like, it's that easy to rip the cowl off, But dramatically and emotionally, it's so fitting, and you can see in Selina's face that she sees that flash of happiness. And for a second, she's like, "I would love to live with you in that castle like a fairy tale." Again, the fairy tale idea is the key to understanding Batman Returns. But then the mask comes back down. She claws Bruce. "I just couldn't live with myself." It's not a happy ending. And then reality comes back in when Shrek starts talking, and he now knows both their identities, and could easily kill Batman. And almost does. Now here you have the 9 lives finished out. Again, not common for a comic book summer movie where the heroine of the film gets shot point blank range multiple times over and over again. I love how he just looks at the gun and he's like, "What? This thing have blanks in it?" Now, what's really interesting and great thematically about Shrek dying this way that I've never heard discussed. So his whole goal was, he says if his life has any meaning, it's power, and he wants to build this power plant. So Selina killing him with electricity and frying him to death while he has all the power he'll ever need. And there's a little bit in some of the script drafts and in the novelization about some of the lights in Gotham blinking on and off, like it fried some of the power grid, which is what Shrek talks about in not building the power plant. And it's also thematically fitting that Selina uses the stun gun that she took from the Red Triangle clown when she was still just plain Selina. So it's like the coup de grace of her character arc that she manages to off Shrek, strike a blow for her own strength, and, ostensibly commit suicide because, her demise is left ambiguous at this point. But she does it with the stun gun that she took from the clown, which was really the first inkling she had of a sense of purpose, because as you saw, she, couldn't resist hitting him with it a little bit. And here's the penguin in his final moments. Black goo coming out of the mouth of Plenty. This is where he's at his most pitiable. He comes out very much like the cliche of the final villain going to take out the hero at the last minute. But Elfman's music goes for a turn here where you can tell you really feel so terrible for this character, even though he just wanted to kill a bunch of infant children. And then this is a wonderful gag shot of the corpse of Shrek, beautifully fried to a perfected crisp. But Bruce is frantically searching for Selina, finds no evidence or anything, and is distracted so he doesn't hear Penguin, so Penguin could literally kill Batman. So there's an element of danger here. At the last moment, Bruce turns around to face his destiny in a great hero shot. And of course,
Back the cute one.
so it's a nice build-up, and obviously Penguin is not going to kill Batman, though he obviously could, but it just makes him even more pitiable because he's still trying, and all he wanted to do was accomplish his goals and achieve some level of respect, even if it meant, murdering first the children of Gotham and then Gotham itself. And it's a very sad moment when he does fall, And, a lot of people complain about the Penguin funeral, the Penguin pallbearers coming out here. But again, this is not something you've ever seen before. And yes, it's a very Tim Burton moment. It's a very stylized moment. It doesn't really make a lot of sense realistically, but thematically, it fits perfectly. And again, you get your money's worth. You've never seen a group of 6 pallbearing penguins, leading their great friend to his watery grave. And again, his grave is the very water that he was essentially born out of. So that theme is carried through, whether it was him being thrown in the water by his parents, wanting to drown all the children of Gotham in the water, wanting to drown Shrek in the water, but then he himself is buried in it. And then the final shot here is of the goo coming out in the water and slowly going down, which then transitions to one last shot of Gotham for the final close of the film. And, of course, there are more Volkswagens. Now, here is the final Elfman cue with the Batman theme played very somberly, in a very somber mood, and Bruce still has the scars from Selina. He's obviously traumatized, thinking about the events, what he had done, what he could have done differently. Could he have saved her? She's still there, and then sees the brief flash on the wall there. Now, this whole moment, no dialogue, beautifully stated. Elfman's score swells up, almost goes full Bernard Herrmann mode here. This is my favorite moment of the entire film. This is my favorite moment of any Batman film, my favorite moment of any live-action comic film. This is emotionally beautiful, classically haunting, and the fulfillment of Bruce's arc. And this is where the tragedy of Bruce and Selina in Batman Returns comes to a close, and he only finds a black cat in the darkness and is left with his own questions, his own demons, his own guilt, his survivor's guilt, and wondering maybe could she still be out there somewhere. But the Batman theme comes back in because the crusade goes on and never ends, and there will be no closure ever. And then the fog comes back in, because as Bruce walks down there, he breaks that fog from like a sewer grate. And then as he walks away, the fog comes back up and masks back over him, standing back off. And he gets back in the car with Alfred, and we get a little trail of the Catwoman theme. And then the cat there. It's just such a beautiful grace note to close the film. Sometimes I kind of get choked up a little because it's so eloquent. Goodwill towards men and women, he thinks, in retrospect. And that's it. And then to be a dark mirror to the end of 89, we have the pan up through the cityscape. And it's the inverse of Batman 89, as if to say, yes, this is still Batman. Batman continues. Batman is eternal, but he is forever alone as the dark, scarred vigilante of the night. Now, this shot here, of course, was tacked on at the end as a last minute. They wanted to keep Catwoman alive, and it helps you leave without it being such a complete downer. It's a downer of an ending, but her appearing there means that, she will hopefully be around to play again with Batman another day. And of course, they left that open for a sequel and the spin-off Catwoman film that was, going to be written by Daniel Waters, maybe directed by Tim Burton. But that fell into development hell and, never got out of it. And eventually we wound up with the Halle Berry 2004 Catwoman film. So that is Batman Returns, and here we are in the end credits with a lovely selection of Danny Elfman cues to play you out as the exit music for the film. And again, this is a downer of an ending, but emotionally it completes everything that's been set up, and it is by far and large my favorite moment in any live-action comic film, because that a Batman story should end with that level of eloquence, and very often does not. I like that the final cues chosen for the end credits, you get samplings of the various themes that we've heard throughout the film, but it trails off from the more heroic Batman march to this very somber, very intricate music that fits the fact that this is a heck of a downer of an ending. So once again, this is a Tim Burton film through and through. There was no real involvement from Goober and Peters. Tim Burton basically had, carte blanche to make the movie he wanted to. So, a lot of people like to point out he likes to focus on the villains and build them up and create brand new characters, which he does, and they're beautifully realized here. But, Batman is a strong presence. He is even more reactive than he is in 89, but you can tell there's a character growth. I think Keaton does some interesting things with Bruce and, builds on what happened in 89. But this movie really is trying to distance itself from 89 and, Tim Burton trying to make a statement of what he wants to do with the character. Of course, he was going to come in and, probably do Batman 3, but after the response to Batman Returns not being the complete 100% success of 89 and having the merchandising partners kind of panic and the parents panic and the negative response to the darkness and adult content of the film, Warner Bros. Basically kind of nixed that idea and decided to look for a different direction and bring other people in, which led to Joel Schumacher being chosen, who often gets labeled with the moniker of lightening up the franchise, but that was something totally that Warner Brothers did. It was their directive, so anybody who got hired would have been, made to do that. It would have been interesting, Tim Burton's Batman 3. It would have had a lot of the elements of Forever if it had gone with the original draft that the Bachelors started writing, which was the first draft of Forever, and they had meetings with Tim Burton, but it just never came to pass, like the Catwoman sequel with Michelle Pfeiffer. Here we have some of the credits for the CGI work, the digital bats and the Batmobile shields and things like that. So this is where the CG creeps in. And then we transition here, like we do to Scandalous in 89, to the incredible Face-to-Face song, which is just a wonderful song and beautifully dark and slinky and just encapsulates the Bruce-Selina relationship. And I love that the film ends with this like 89 does with Scandalous. So I love how it trails off into this. If you've hung out with me this whole time and heard me babble through all of Batman Returns, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this. Again, trying to relate all this stuff and keep up with the film is a bit of a task doing it solo, but it's been fun to revisit a cherished favorite and a film I really think is a masterpiece, but is not necessarily for everybody and is not trying to do a 100% comic accurate Batman. But I think it gets the feeling of Batman so incredibly well and a lot better than a lot of other attempts. I love the credit volunteer bimbo. I have to just point that out. But anyway, this has been a lot of fun. Again, I definitely say you should go check out the Tim Burton commentary on the Batman Returns DVD and Blu-rays, the accompanying featurettes as well, with a lot of cast and crew interviews, and then also the various script drafts. The Sam Hamm Batman 2 is fascinating. And then we have the, of course, Panavision credits, color by Technicolor, and the Dolby Stereo credit. No mention of the, 5.1 AC3, but most people heard Dolby Stereo anyway. So that does it for Batman Returns. Again, thank you for suffering through the film with me, blabbering on over it. Hopefully I didn't overstay my welcome. And once again, humbly yours, I am the motion picture analyst. This has been my commentary for Batman Returns.